to introduce someone that you already know, June Johnson, who is missionary to Ukraine. My mic? It's not on? Oh, there it is. Okay. Now you can turn me off because it's June's turn.
I will go, Lord. If you lead me, I will hold your people in my heart. I'm nervous this morning. I'm nervous because I managed to put down roots here again. The hard thing about being home so long is I started remembering your names. I started getting invited to places, and now I'm getting pulled away. But where there is love, there is also pain. So if there wasn't any pain, there wouldn't have been any love. And so you really loved me, and thanks for loving me while I've been home. You guys have been with me for 17 years. September 21st marks 17 years of us in Ukraine. And I want to thank you for that. We've been working together doing half and half ministry, half to kids and teens, and half to evangelism through medicine. You know I'm a nurse. You know that I'm specialized in wound care and ostomy care. And you know that usually I go to Ukraine for 3 years and I come home for about 8 or 9 months, invite you once again to the 50-yard line and say, guys, look what God is doing through you. Look how God is reaching his people in Ukraine through you. And that was the usual pattern for a whole long time until March 1st of 2014. I fled Crimea, where I worked and lived for all of those years, and came home and stood before you a year and a half ago to say, I don't know what's next. I really don't know what's next. If you would turn the next slide. Is my mic on? Is that okay? Okay. This is the whole country of Ukraine, and that's just pointing out the peninsula. Legal or not, it is now under the control of Russia. But that is where God had us serving for 16 years. The blue around the peninsula is a shallow sea, and even though I came home a year and a half ago, I've got some photos to show you. Because even though I was here, work was still going on there. I am not required. I'm not the gateholder of the gospel, thank the Lord. The work has continued on, and I wanted to share a few pictures this morning of what's gone on just this last summer even, thanks to your choosing to trust and continue to support me. The next slide just shows you, just wanted to say thanks because a lot of stuff has happened this past year and a half in Crimea and in Ukraine, even though I've needed to be here. The next slide will show that there was 26 vacation Bible schools that happened in Crimea. So you got a kind of a 2-for-1er here, you guys. You got one missionary, and she's working in Russia and Ukraine, and all 26 vacation Bible schools that were planned when I went on that scout trip this spring, and I went to Crimea for 6 weeks, and I went to every pastor that I work with, and when I heard, as the Lord allows, we plan to have Vacation Bible School, I was prepared to help them with 80% of what they needed to make that outreach happen. They all happened. They all happened. The next slide is showing you that equals 1,000 kids hearing the gospel in Russia this past summer. The next slide is I received, thanks to the internet and Skype, many thank you letters. And this one happens to be from Pastor Volodya, who's out in Mikhailovka, which means nothing to you, but it is a tiny little village. And Pastor Volodya is saying, thanks be to God that you choose to partner with our church and accomplish the work of God through your prayers and sacrificial giving. The next slide is in Vitacavoya, a very small new church start, and they just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for the possibility to tell the kids about God. The next slide is not only were you involved in Vacation Bible Schools, you were also involved in teen outreaches this past summer. This is this summer's youth group in Sudak. They're out in the mountains. They're doing their traditional 5-6 day camping trip. You, because of your support, you made it possible. The next slide says for 50 teens to experience a Christian camping experience. So what does that mean? That means like the teenagers are pulled out of church, so the kids that attend church, and those kids are also inviting a friend along, and they go camping for a week. And so it's devotions in the morning, it's a theme for a week, it's games during the afternoon, it's walking and hiking. It's a chance to live and walk beside these kids for 6 days in a row outside the walls of the church. And like you remember in your own youth, something happens out there beside the campfire that doesn't happen as quickly maybe here in the church. So you made that happen too. Misha is pictured now. He is a youth leader, but he came to Christ through Christian camping. The next slide is a father and a son that I do not know, but I do know that you remember Alla. Do you remember Alla in February that came here? She's from Ukraine and she's the director of the handicap camp. And she came and presented. You were her first American church that she had ever stood in front of, and she was so nervous. And you loved her. You loved her, and God would continue to bless the rest of her weeks in America. But you sent her off with $2,000 that Sunday. She was blown out of the water. My ministry was able to provide another $1,000. And then other churches came alongside. They had the biggest camp this summer. It was the most prayed for camp. It was the most nerve-wracking camp. And it was the camp that had the most of Muslim background believers. It was also the camp that bore the most fruit, the most visible fruit. And out of this camp immediately has sprung up small groups. Invitations were strategically done so that everyone that went back home had someone to follow up with them. And there's small groups that are happening in Crimea with handicapped kids and their caregivers. The next slide. I don't know this little guy's name, but I do know Tanya. Tanya lives in Feodosia. She goes to the Feodosia church. We're good friends. She is a Christian massage therapist. She sacrificed, she donates a week of her time to come and give massage to the kids and to the parents and to the volunteers, and mostly to love on them, but also doing teaching of how to save your back, how to help your kid decrease spasms, all those practical things that the caregivers come hungry for. You gave them a chance to share and show the love of Christ. The next slide is them at the beach this year. The man in front in the white t-shirt, his name is Volodya. He was a military officer in the Russian army. When he had an appendicitis, he went to the hospital, and I think you know what an epidural is, where they put the shot in your spine to numb the rest of your body. That's what he had for his appendicitis. It went bad. The epidural went bad, and he is paralyzed from the waist down. And he considers that God gift to him, because he came to God through that situation and is now the most on fire handicapped pastor I work with. And he is one of the men that lead in, that work with Alla, and also do small groups throughout the year until next camp. The next slide is Alla herself saying, I just want to say thank you very much again. That's Alla's oldest daughter next to her. And she said, on behalf of Grace Baptist Church, I want to thank you, all of you who responded to our call for help. You allowed 40 kids and 40 caregivers to come and hear about God and feel His love. May God bless you. And the last slide is this year's camp saying thank you and waving. That's the whole shebang. Kids, caregivers, volunteers, and leadership. The next slide, please. So you know that I came back on March 1st. I was here a year, and then some of you looked at, this is the word for crazy in Ukraine, some of you looked at me like that when I, on March 8th, 1 year later, returned to Crimea. And I had to see for myself what's happened. It's one thing to look at the news on Google Translate. It is another thing to look at it in the face of a person that you've worked with for 16 years. What's it really like? So I went back to Crimea, and I took a 2 months there and 2 months trip into Ukraine. And God showed me that no, as it was for you for 16 years, it no longer will be. But I have allowed a door of opening for you to continue the relationships. So I'm not going to live in Crimea anymore. I'm going to move, but I will be able to visit, because I don't know what he was thinking, but Putin gave me a tourist visa for 3 years, multi-entry, so I'm going. If you would show the next slide, please. So Crimea is on the bottom there, and now you see Kyiv. Kyiv is the yellow star. That is the capital of this country. And this whole country looks huge on this wall, but it all fits within the state of Texas. So that gives you kind of a package. Zaporozhye and Berdyansk are places that I've been working with for 12 years. There are churches that do evangelism through medicine in big ways, much bigger than we ever accomplished ourselves in Crimea. By living in Kyiv, I can continue to work with them, continue helping